Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for attending the first of two webinars focused on women in STEM. My name is Lindsay Doherty and I am the Assistant Director of the Central Grants Office, and I will be handing off our event today to presenter Pam McGee. But if you have any questions or issues at all, please don't hesitate to contact me during the webinar by typing a message into the chat box. Just a reminder, this is our first time with GoToWebinar, and we appreciate your patience if any glitches should arise. And also just a reminder of our second and final webinar in this series will be held on Friday, September 11th. And if you're registered, you should have already received communication to that effect. And if not, please send me a note and we'll be happy to get you registered. There are a few people we haven't yet finalized their registration, but you should see that come through this morning. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any issues. And then also towards the end, we're going to be taking questions and answers, but taking questions for Pam to answer, and you can submit those at any time by typing into the chat box, and that'll go directly to me. Just please include your name and department for questions, and that will help Pam really tailor the response to your interests. So let me just switch this over to Pam and we'll get going. Okay, Pam, you're all set.
Good morning. Are we okay, Lindsay?
Yep, you're ready. Everybody's muted, so you have their full attention.
Well, thank you. Hi, I'm Pam McGee, and I am here to visit with you for about the next hour, hour and a half, however long we choose to take, on how to do some recruiting of women into technology programs, you know, the STEM crisis, as they're calling it in our country. I'm going to start in an awkward place, and I'm going to start with just a little bit of a story about STEM. And that story is about my 12-year-old daughter. She is beautiful, and she is driven, and she likes to work on motorcycles, and she likes to build tree houses. And she told me the other day that she thinks perhaps her first job will be running a lab at General Electric. And I'm not sure how she even knew about that. Evidently, she's been out looking at some of these things on the internet, which I should probably monitor a little bit more. And she is just a driven young lady. It has been an incredible pleasure to have her as my daughter in a lot of respects, but also a challenge. Because 6 months ago, we were sitting in a 5th grade classroom with a teacher, as you'll have heard in the past and we'll hear more about today, who was a lovely teacher. However, my daughter, being an average student, somewhat capable of lots of great things, wasn't getting the math that she needed. And matter of fact, there were often times when my daughter led the teacher through the math exercises, because this particular teacher in Fargo, North Dakota, which has wonderful schools, wonderful teachers, a K through 12 system that most communities would just absolutely want to model and die for, was just not prepared to teach her math. And it was a little bit disappointing. On the other hand, my daughter and my husband and I took it upon ourselves to do some things to fill that gap. I start there because I want you to know I just have such a passion for this topic. And I have had this passion for a number of years, but it's waxed and waned and waxed and waned. I've went through, multiple stops in my career where I'm going to be a feminist and I'm going to show up loud and clear and bang my fist on the table. And then I've went through, oh, it doesn't matter, shut your mouth, wear a suit and a tie, and act like a boy to climb up the corporate ladder because that's what you want to do. And then I've went through now this third phase, which is educate. Because I believe, as Nelson Mandela and other great leaders ahead of us have said, that the more we educate on what the issue and the opportunities are, the more we will move change forward. So that's somewhat where I stand right now. Welcome to Recruiting Women into Technology Programs. This is a two-part session. Today we're going to focus predominantly on recruiting. Then once we take those ideas and wrestle with them, then our next session, as Lindsay mentioned, we're going to focus on, once we get them in the department, how do we keep them? Those are such connected issues, yet they have such different needs, if you will, and different problems for us to solve. I work at Minnesota State University Moorhead. I am the president of one of the largest women's organization in our community, which is called Women's Connect. And I'm excited to be here with you. I'd like to personally thank Joyce, who has helped me get involved in this topic and who has been one of my mentors in the past. And I would like to thank Lindsay, who has been my technical right arm and somewhat of a comfort in doing this through a webinar. I do webinars all the time for my industry practice I have. This is such a special topic, though, that I miss not seeing your eyes, because eyes tell you so much as the window to the soul. If at any time you need to interrupt because something is not happening in the manner it would, let Lindsay know, and Lindsay will ping me, and we'll take care of that need. Here's really what today looks like. I'm going to throw out a lot of ideas. It's going to feel like a global think tank this morning, because I'm just going to throw as many ideas at you as I can. Before we do that, we'll have some startups on, where the content came from and the methodology and all that stuff that's important, but probably not as important as when we get to the parts of what can I do about this if I'm passionate about it, or how do I get passionate about it. Then after that, we're just going to open it up for a Q&A, and I will try to share as much information and share as many answers as I possibly can. So to get started, I've introduced myself as a mom, and I've introduced myself as a professor, a chair at the Department of Technology at Minnesota State University Moorhead. Isn't that an interesting place to start? Because as you well know, a different gender would have started in a different spot. Maybe, maybe not. You'll also notice on my screen that my presentation is bright pink. I did that for a purpose, because there's some gender biases that we have to break through, and there's a subtlety that we'll talk about later. Formally, how I got reintroduced to this topic is through the ATMAE Women in Technology Division. There was a couple of women there interested in doing some research, and I was a new faculty member and I needed to do some research, and I thought, well, okay, I'll take this topic on. I think it's kind of dated. I think it's kind of old. I don't know how interesting it's going to be, but it sure sounds easy to me. So I'm going to jump in and get my first publication. It has been everything but that. Yes, I did get the publication, and yes, in some respects it was easy because it generated such a passion in a group of women, and in some respects it's been the hardest research platform I've ever had, because it has become so near and dear to me. It also reminded me that we have made progress, and I like progress, and I think you like progress, but it also reminded me that we're way behind. Statistics that we'll talk about in a little bit somewhat startle me. And then I made a decision that my platform and my legacy that I want to leave to my family is to help fight this gap. Not in a mean-spirited way, not in a way of a feminist, I'm going to wear a suit and tie to work, but in a way that helps us look at it hopefully differently than we ever have. We've done discovery through the National Institute for Women in Trades. I've done a tremendous amount of research through our local chamber. And then I've had some training, which Joyce and I attended together, at the IWITS organization, which you'll learn about later. But enough on that. Let's jump into some content. We really have three objectives: share perspective and generate ideas, focus on key action items and that clear the hurdles for women in STEM, and talk about some resources to recruit women in technology. My hunch is that the people on the phone, the people not on the phone, have been exposed to most of the content in my presentation. Now, I hate to say that, because now you went, okay, hit mute, open email, zone out. Please don't. My challenge for us today is, whether or not you've been exposed to this content or not, look at it from a different lens. Look at it from an ownership issue, and look at it from an accountability issue. All of us have been, I shouldn't say all of us, lots of these statistics are very available on the internet and on the news. You've probably heard some of the similar statistics I have. You probably have your own. But in general, they all tell the same story. They tell the story that females don't make as much money as males. We aren't in top CEO positions. We make up more of the labor force, but we haven't really established our footprint in like the financial services, the technology services, medicine. In construction management, 9% of the executives are female. In my region, it's only 4.5, so we're behind on that. So the statistics are there, and it's evident that our challenge is huge. But for the first time in the last decade that I've been working on this, I actually feel that there's a momentum taking place in our communities. This is probably the statistic that bothers me the most. And this is a statistic that I found from the Center of Progress, which is an organization that I encourage you all to get involved with in some respects, whether it's a static relationship where you just use their information. It's the Center for Progress. You can do a search on the web, and they really provide some of the most interesting twists on how we can prepare for the future. We can't prepare for today unless we know what the future is going to bring or not going to bring. A second organization that I encourage you to take a look at is the World Future Society. And the World Future Society talks about a lot of different issues. They talk about the issue that, in technology, it's going to be an app world. All of us are going to do the majority of our teaching, the majority of our business, the majority of our recruiting, the majority of our retention, the majority of our business is going to be done through a cell phone app. And you've probably heard that before, and I think we're getting closer and closer to that. We need to pay attention to those trends because those are going to affect how we manage gender, not only in the STEM field, but in every field available to us. Here's a perspective that I want us to think about as we go through this presentation. And the perspective that I pause here because it's a perspective that somewhat feels overwhelming to me, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. When I share these, big ideas and these big issues, and maybe they're big or small to you, I shouldn't be so grand to assume they are, it doesn't mean that every little choice we make won't make a difference. I'm under the impression that your university is no different than mine. There's lots that we can do, but we just aren't necessarily going to get 2 full-time faculty members to do that, or full-time staff. We might get, a part-time, a half-time, a quarter-time, a work study, no study. But as you'll see at the end of this conversation we have today, I was a team of 1, and I don't say this to brag, I say this to give hope. I was a team of 1 who took my gender inequity in the programs I run from 2% in 2007 to over 10% in 2015 or 14. Actually, I believe that has went up in 2015, but I haven't gotten the data yet. But here's really the perspective I had to take in order to fully get some legs in this issue. This is a macro issue. This is not just a STEM issue, which makes it, even more interesting to me in some respects, because if it was just a STEM issue, we could tackle it within a boundary. This isn't a STEM issue. This is a healthcare issue. This is a education issue. I was sitting at my son's tennis game last night. He's a 15-year-old boy in high school. And I was sitting there last night, and all of a sudden all these cameras show up from the local news station. And I'm thinking, okay, this isn't football, this isn't soccer, this isn't tennis. What the heck happened? Was there a bad accident? Because, if any of us are tennis players, we know that tennis never gets any coverage in the school media or in any media. But all of our, a couple of our local news stations were standing out there with their cameras, and they came up to interview a few of us, and the question was, how are you going to handle the shortage of teachers? They didn't just say, how are you going to handle the shortage of STEM teachers? And you've probably heard in the news about the severe shortage in California of K through 12 teachers. So I think what we have to do right off the bat is look at some of the challenges presented by STEM, but also look at some of the challenges we're dealing with at a macro level, because the competition has just gotten worse. It also takes time and dedicated resources. You know, I'd like to be able to say that after this presentation you can spend 10 minutes on this topic and boom, it's done. It's not going to happen that way. Another company that I'm working with, a local company who wants to increase their footprints, female presence in their company, not just in education, hired me to come in and do some, research with them, figure out what the problems are, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, I sat across from the CEO and he's like, I don't think we're going to have time to work on this issue right now. You know, as disappointed as I was, I so appreciated his ability to say that, because he didn't give anybody false pretense or false hope. So keep that in mind. You may or may not be the decision maker on being able to make that. You might be like me and have a dean or a provost who's saying, let's just do this. Let's do this and let's figure out how to do it, and give me your top one need and I'll try to get you as many resources for that as possible. The third thing is it takes both genders to be engaged in the problem. We're going to learn about that later. It takes faculty, staff, and administration. We struggled a little bit on our campus a couple of years ago because we were finger pointing. You know, if our recruiters would just, if our faculty would, and we had to kind of stop ourselves and have joint ownership of the problem. And then we realized it takes a willingness to have difficult conversations. And when we first tried to have those, we failed because we didn't know how to have them. I came in with my, everybody's got to love this topic as much as I do, why wouldn't they? And then my, very traditional engineers came in and said, this is crazy. If they want to work in my world, then they should adapt to my world, and period, end of story. All we ended up doing, in essence, was somewhat fighting with each other and wasting some time. So one of our first steps is to, get people trained on how to have those difficult conversations. So I offered some crucial conversations training, some nonviolent communication, some compassionate communication. Now, did it change the world overnight? No. But did it help us have a shared language where we knew how to move the dial together a little bit forward in a much different way? And then it takes some courage to show up and say, I'm going to shift my paradigm and my belief today. I'm going to look at this differently. It is a, kind of to heroize a change in belief. And I mean heroize when somebody says, I always thought this issue was because girls didn't know how to speak up as much. You know what? I don't think that anymore. I think the issue is that girls don't speak up as much anymore because they're trained their whole life not to. That should be publicized on a big, award plaque in somebody's office somewhere, because that shift in thinking is what's going to help us change the world on this topic. So as you hear some of the, the tactical and the research on this, those are the perspectives that I have, that I've tried to bring to this presentation. It's hard for me not to want to stop right now and say, let's talk about this. But as we're going through the presentation, if you're like me, I always have a little notebook with me. Take a pause, write a question down about, boy, I had this situation, here's what happened, how could have I made it better? I'm, I'm not the, the end-all be-all here, and I'm not trying to come off like that. But if there's some things we can share on the topic, I'd like to, answer your questions. I'm going to start with a belief question for you, because until we wrestle with this perception on how are we going to recruit more females to STEM, we're just going to keep doing the same old things. And some of those same old things need to be done because they're important, and some of those same old things maybe don't need to be done. But it starts with a belief. A guy named Dr. Seligman, who's a psychologist from Penn State, studied how we believe things for a long time and how we believe things innately in how we look at the world. So, for example, he looked at people who were severely, severely depressed, and he couldn't figure out how some people who were severely depressed could come out of this depression and how some people who were severely depressed never did. He looked at the chemicals and all of the things that surround such a horrific disease in our society. That's where he started. But then he took this belief model and embedded it some change and said, well, maybe if we look at belief models in business, belief models in leaders, belief models in industries. And so I'm going to just pause for less than 30 seconds, which is going to seem like a lifetime to you. And I want you to write down one belief you hold about females in STEM. One belief. Just take a second and write that down. Okay, I'll share a belief that I have. I have a belief that women in STEM are no different than men in STEM. I used to have that belief. Women in STEM are no different than men in STEM. Why are we focusing on gender? So my feelings towards this STEM topic were really somewhat negative about 10 years ago. I started thinking I'm never going to be engaged in a women in technology division. I'm never going to be engaged in, thinking that I have to do anything different or fight the glass ceiling. I'm just going to buckle down and get the work done, which then therefore led to my behavior. I ignored all the cues and I ignored all the signs and the flags that were going on in my community of STEM professionals because I believed I wasn't working harder to get tenure. I believed I wasn't having to be ostracized or left out because the boys were doing something different. It led to a different behavior, and that behavior was to ignore it, to not acknowledge it, to not do anything about it. People would ask me, will you be a female mentor? And I'm like, no, get her own. Until I shift that belief, and I said, and I exposed myself to some new thinking where the belief was men and women are different. Men and women have different needs in STEM. There's an issue with men and women in STEM because there aren't enough of them. My feelings became a little bit more compassion. My thinking became a little bit more cerebral in how I can look for cues and signs. And I signed up to research the topic. And then my behavior became more open to figure out what we could do about it. So as you think about anything in this presentation as we go forward, I challenge you and encourage you to think about how you're going to master some of your own belief shifts and how you're going to, in a gentle, kind way, help others master some of their own belief shifts. You can't make anybody change a belief, and maybe you don't want to change any beliefs yourself. However, through education, we often change beliefs. Through distilling fear, which somewhat is an underlying premise of some of these issues in not wanting to work together as genders, we don't distill. We distill, or we stall progress. So let's get started. And here's where the research was rock solid. In the last 7 years that I've been looking at formal academic journals, doing my own primary research with over 1,000 women in a database telling me what their situation is. All of the research leads back to 3 things, which I wish I could see you all raising your hand, because the majority of you would raise your hand right now and say, I've seen these before. And you've seen them before because they keep popping up again and again because we don't really solve the issues. The first issue with not having enough females in STEM programs is we don't have preparation in secondary schools. The example I started out with my daughter, she has had 4 years of brilliant math teachers from kindergarten through 4th grade. She hits a teacher who doesn't feel comfortable with the subject in 5th grade, and I see some warning signs of her saying things like, I don't like math. I don't want to go to math. My teacher doesn't know how to teach math. Mrs. Doesn't like math. And I see some switching. I have to believe that isn't just in my school district. The second is there's a lot of negative perceptions out there. We're going to watch a video on societal perceptions. Often as a female boss, I'm a female bitch. And I don't use that term in slang. I use that term in presence, if you will. Because if I walk in with as much energy and enthusiasm as a guy does, I'm often seen as somebody that has maybe a hidden agenda. Another perception is that if we want equality in pay, then I'm not going to buy you flowers anymore. There's a negative perception that we want it all. I want somebody to buy me flowers, open doors for me, equal pay. Yes. I could never figure out in the research what an intimate relationship of somebody buying me flowers has to do with how much I get paid on the job. We just have to get rid of that connection. There is no connection. And so those are some of the perceptions that need to shift. And then thirdly, we need to create a female-friendly educational and institutional environment. There are different needs for different genders, and we just have to say we're different, not deficient, which was the title of our first research paper, and we need different things, and we have to respect different things. The female work environment should never replace the male work environment, nor should the male work environment ever replace the female work environment. But how do we come together and share a work environment that meets the needs of everybody and creates opportunity for people to excel and strive? So I'm going to actually pause right there, because now if you want to hear all the stats and the facts on the research, I can give you that, through email, through a voicemail, through a personal conversation. But it is my impression that Ivy Tech is ready to get started and wants to start doing some things. So I have collected for the remaining part of our presentation as many ideas that I have bumped into that will help you move forward on recruiting females in STEM. So let's just take a breath. Let's pause. Joyce probably didn't tell you that you hired the Energizer bunny here, because I go fast and I go jerky. But I want us to just pause here and think about what we've talked about. We've talked about it's a macro issue. We've talked about all genders need to be at the table. We've talked about lots of this stuff makes theoretical sense, and there's a lot of data to support it. But there's little action in changing it. There's little action in changing it. If we could tackle 3 topics, grade schools, negative perceptions, and female-friendly work environments, it is my guess that in less than a year, we would have made instrumental progress. The next items you're going to see are a collection of success stories, and success stories from other educators that I've personally talked to, or success stories from research that I bumped into, or success stories that I have bumped into that businesses have done, and that they have done successfully that may cross the border between education and industry. As you look at some of these ideas, I encourage you to pause, and I'm going to slow down a little bit, because we're going to talk about it and then you're going to write something down. We're going to talk about it and then you're going to write something down. You obviously can't do all of these at once, but you can obviously pick some of your favorites. So as we go through the next half an hour before we get through Q&A, I would like you to take and write down ideas you see as possibilities. Don't think about constraints right now. We live in a world of constraints. Think about possibility. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about those if you want more information on them. And then you can take that list of possibility and have all those conversations on what you can do next month, next semester, and next year. But right now, think about possibility. An obvious one, and maybe you have these at Ivy Tech, maybe you don't. I tried to do as many searches on the website as I could, and I found some information on, corporate partnerships you have, but I wasn't sure if that corporate partnership was focused on just, financial resources or content or hiring your graduates, or if they were focused on, increasing females in STEM. One of the best corporate partnerships we have in Fargo, North Dakota is Microsoft. Most people don't know that one of the biggest Microsoft offices is in Fargo, North Dakota. And so we have this Cadillac company that has money and desire right now to improve women presence in software, 10 miles away from my campus. And we ignored them for a while. Now we don't. There's this Gidgee Girls that Microsoft does once a year, and they bring in thousands of females interested and not interested in technology and STEM fields. They partner with local manufacturers, and we just roll up our sleeves and get our hands down and dirty. It took us about 7 years to get that going, and now it is vibrant, and now for the first time we're turning people down because we don't have enough spots on the agenda for everybody that wants to participate. Our first meeting, we were begging and giving out free gift certificates and saying, if you please come just for 15 minutes, you're a friend of my pastor in my church, or you're a friend of my softball coach, can you please just do us a favor? That has grown now to be one of the most successful events in our region. If you have a start on that, it starts with a desire and it starts with some failure. Our first couple of sessions we went, I don't know if we want to go forward, how is this going to work, is it worth our time, I'm tired. I'm so glad that a few of us didn't give up. And I wasn't in on the ground floor, don't get me wrong. There were people that were well ahead of me at Microsoft that were trying to figure out how to do this. So if that's something you have some passion and connections for, think about who you already know and who you can have a conversation with. The second one was a Pathways to Success program, where you start in grade school and you go through high school. My university did not do this. Our competitor, North Dakota State University, NDSU as you'll hear me call them, did this. They took their STEM program and they said, how can we start in grade school with juicing up the girls and the boys, because they were actually having a decline in enrollment in both genders, and excite them about technology. And they started this after-school STEM program, which my daughter belonged to. And on Monday and Wednesday, they had a collection of 20 people that came in and did different cool STEM things, from local faculty at our technical college, MSCTC, to an engineer at Case New Holland in our backyard. And they just did awesome things. My daughter couldn't wait to go to that. And because that excitement got generated with my daughter, all of a sudden they had an attendance where once again now she has to apply to it and get accepted. It wasn't a lot of work to start. There were two things that were paramount. Number one, you had 20 people and 20 experts, because for some reason there were 20 events and how the calendar fell out for the school. And then secondly, you had a couple of kids from the NDSU marketing team that were willing to use this as a senior project and put together marketing materials, and not just put together the marketing materials, but market the materials. The third idea in increasing preparation in secondary schools is teach the teacher. I don't have clearance to talk about the school that did this, but it was a tech school in the state of Minnesota, and what they did is they started offering math prep courses for K through 12 teachers, particularly 4th through 8th, and they would offer them free. And the teachers would get their CE units and all the other things that they were judged on, and it was perceived as quite an honor to get selected into this program. When they offered it the first time, it was a failure because no teacher raised their hands, because few teachers wanted to admit as a professional that they were deficient in math as a K through 12 teacher. They switched the marketing of it, and they said, come learn how to teach math the new way. Be on the cutting edge. Take advantage of. And once again, this local tech school in a community of 50,000 in the state of North Dakota, or pardon me, Minnesota, had a standing line only. And they offered these classes in the morning before school. So the teacher could come in and it was an early morning class. It worked. Then they offered the classes on one night a week. It didn't work. And then they offered the classes in a condensed format 4 Saturday mornings in a row. And it worked. And so they've kind of plugged through that in the Teach the Teacher. What this tech school found, though, when they did that, is they also taught the teacher about math, but they taught them about STEM. And they created a partnership and a relationship and an excitement where now they're more apt to talk about a STEM field when they would never bring that up before. So it really solved two issues with one. Then the GTG program, the Gifted and Talented for Girls program. Most grade schools have a gifted program where kids go off and do extra special things. And, you know, if you're like me, those are the kids I want in my school. Those are the kids I want in my classes. And they rarely have enough resources, and they're strapped. And my daughter's gifted and talented teacher goes to 4 grade schools in the community, and she barely has enough time. So for her to take this on was, you know, a little bit arduous. So in progress, not launched right now, is the funding from a local business to do GTG, which is a Gifted and Talented for Girls in STEM interest from K through 6. And the girls will not be uninvited from the cross-gender Gifted to Gifted program, but they will have added modules and added opportunities in their GTG program. For example, they'll be introduced to scientists from NDSU. They'll be introduced to auto body mechanic teachers from MSCTC. And they'll spend some time with these people in the event they don't have that support, you know, at home, or that understanding that a girl can do it. And then 10 for 10. 10 for 10 is pick 10 girls, pick 10 math topics, and spend 10 hours refining them. And this is a topic that our local tech school is engaging in. And that is probably the newest idea I bumped into, but it's 10 for 10 for 10. It seemed more palatable. Move on to, so anyway, I'm going to pause there. I mean, there's just 5, you know, quick ideas that you may or may not have had exposure to. What I want you to do now is I just want you to pause and say, what part of these ideas am I excited about, and what part would I be willing to give an hour of my time towards, you know, a week, a month, or what time do I have, you know, or maybe I'm full-time focused on this, part-time focused on this. Just pause. I'm going to take a 15-second pause for you to catch your breath and for me to catch my breath and for you to think about possibility. Okay. The next topic, you know, I wish we could spend all day at an off-site retreat in some fancy lodge in Indiana really buckling down on this topic, because I believe until we do this, the other things fall into place slower. And the changing perceptions that we have to think about are, what perceptions are we trying to change? And until we define that, it's going to be hard to know how to change that. I was sitting with a group of male executives at Microsoft. They're one of my clients on the side from teaching. And we were in the boardroom, and what was typical is I was one of 2 females, and the other executives, although kind and friends of mine, and we were talking about how this meeting would run differently if they were 2 males instead of 2 females. And, well, one of the guys said, "We've got to change that." And I said, "What's that? What are we trying to change?" "Well, you know, that perception that," and he paused. And so as we think about changing perceptions, the one word I want us to think about is the word that, T-H-A-T. When we're talking about changing perceptions, what is that? And what is that perception we're trying to change? If I could change 3 of them, the top 3 perceptions that I would like to change is that I don't want to be a girl that I can't be a girl in a boy's world. And that means to me that I can use a pink background for my presentation, and that is perceived as normal as using a blue and a green and a black background. Some of you were perhaps thinking, you know, surprised oh, she's a real feminist, she chose pink because. I chose pink for this presentation for a very thoughtful reason, is I want someday for all of us to open up a presentation with a pink background and not see anything different. If I could change that perception. The second perception I would like to change is that I want it all. And that's a negative thing. Yes, I do want it all. What I want from my relationships in an intimate way, male to female, boy to girl, flowers to door opening, is much different than what I want in a male relationship sitting in a boardroom. And I want us to change the perception that they are connected. The very first day I started in my current department, 10 years ago now, I was going on a recruiting trip with another male colleague in the department. And we had known each other a couple of years in the community and a couple of years with myself as an adjunct. And we were getting ready to carry down these boxes of materials we were thinking about. And it was my show and my deal, and he was coming along with me. And we were walking down the hallway, and he said, well, I'll meet you in the car. And I looked at him, and I said, well, great. And I kind of looked at the boxes, and he's like, well, you know, you're one of those women that I'm sure if I helped you carry down those boxes that you would think poorly of me. And I looked at him, and I said, if I was a boy, would you let the boy carry down all the boxes, or would you help the boy? You know, needless to say, not probably the most tender moment in our relationship. And he looked at me, and he's like, you know, I never thought about it that way. And we both carried down the boxes. Now, what I've learned from that is next time I could do it in a little bit more finesseful way, because it did, you know, create a little bit of a tension right away. But we've since worked through that, and now we're, you know, I wouldn't say we're the best of friends, but we certainly have the best of respect for each other. So that's the second perception I want to change. The third perception I want to change is that this is a women's issue. And, you know, Sheryl Sandberg, who has written the book Lean In, which, you know, maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. If you've read it, please do. It's not that academically solid, but it sure has a lot of great ideas in it. She says that, you know, it's a male and a female issue. And it is a male and a female issue. This isn't just because of the guys. This isn't just because of the girls. It's both of us learning to how to have a shared, equal space. Years ago, we learned how to share the space, but we haven't learned how to share the space equally. And I want to change the perception that it's just a girl's issue or a boy's issue. It's an equal issue. So as we think about how we do that, one of the ways that we do and have done on our campus is we just start to attend and sponsor events. My dean and my new president, provost at the time, said, on your professional development plan, each of you are going to be judged and critiqued on how much you're in the community, talking about our institution and talking about various topics as it relates. We took this on in our department to be talking about MSUM, as well as talking about how we increase the female enrollment in our program. MSUM deals with a little bit of a different issue. We have to figure out how to get boys to come to our school. We have more females than males, and our male enrollment in general is declining. However, in select programs like mine, project management, operations management, construction management, graphic technology, etc., it's just the opposite. And so we were goaled and critiqued on getting into the community in different ways. So I called up John Deere and I did a presentation on emotional intelligence at John Deere. It happens to be a background of mine. I also helped launch the Women's Connect program through the chamber. This really wasn't my brainchild. It was Tanya Stendes, who's the president of Ide Bailey. We said, what would happen if we just got 30 women in a room? Now you're going to go, I thought you wanted to change that perception. I did. I didn't know it at the time. What would happen if we got 30 women in the room and we just talked about women's issues, not necessarily women training, women leadership, but women's issues in the workplace in general, and then take it into certain disciplines? you know, we thought, oh great, well if we can get 30 women, we'll be excited. If we can get if we can get 30 women, we'll run the program. If we can get 80 women, we'll be excited. And let's just start. And we started with an idea and a passion. And we got rooms at the Posh Country Club because we thought if they don't want to come because of the topic, maybe they'll want to come because we're going to wine and dine them. And then we're going to get a national speaker. And we're going to put all our eggs in one basket that this national speaker is going to be good. And then we're going to market it in a very non-traditional way, with Pam talking like this on a video and Tanya, and it's not going to be your corporate, boring things that you see. I don't want to say boring. They're good, but sometimes we get bored with them. We had 500 women show up for our event in last January. First we had 30, then we had 80, then we had 100, then we had to change venue because then we had 200, then we had to change venue again because we had 300, then we had to change venue again because we had 500. And we kept excusing our success. We said, well, it's just because of the national speaker. She's really pretty, she's really smart, she's really brilliant, and she has such really great presence, she has a great message. So next time when we have somebody local, because we pulled on only local talent, our enrollment will go back down to 80. We'll be happy if we have 50. By the time our first session was over and we had laid out the issues, just like I laid out the issues and the opportunities here, we had over 140 people registered before the first event was even over. The next session was on confidence, female confidence in male-dominated professions, and we had over 375 women, from executives to frontline managers, from the age of 25 to 45 to 55. In September, or in August, just actually last Tuesday, now we've had 6 to 9 months under our belts, we still had 300 women sign up for this session. And our session was how do you be a woman in a male-dominated world? And we had one of the top female executives running one of the biggest construction management projects in our region. She's part of 4.5% of the females in construction talk. And it was highly revered. Our next session is on my university president is talking about females in education. And before we left, we had nearly 100 people register for that. I can't believe this success is insular to Fargo. I just have to believe that other communities haven't done it this way. So I talk about that maybe the longest because it's something I'm the most passionate about. And so I encourage you to do something and just do it big. I'm as busy as you are. I have as many things on my plate, but I picked one, and when we went after it big. Second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth are things that are going to come together a little bit easier because they're less grand. But the second thing is to start a male privilege initiative. It is modeled after Peggy McIntosh's TED Talk on white privilege and unpacking the invisible knapsack. We have started some discussion groups on how that process in tackling racism applies to attacking gender in STEM. And it'll be hard for me to explain, and nor did we have the time to talk about it today, until you watch that TEDx. Do a search, TEDx, Peggy McIntosh's White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, and say to yourself, how can we use what she did in improving discrimination in the workplace with how we improve gender inequities in the workplace. We held Friday discussion groups on it, and it just really educated. Third, change the ad, share the ads. Put it in schools, put it in grocery stores, play on TV, make a statement. I'm embarrassed of my website right now because they rolled back a website. I have more men than girls on my website. That's inexcusable. I need to have a balance, and I need to do an audit of that all the time, and then I need to share that with our local grade schools and with our community. There's this video I want to show you, or actually I'm not going to show it to you because I want you to go out and watch it, and I'll share the link with you. And it's about how girls look at technology different. If you do a search on females in technology, which some of you may or may not have done. You're going to find hundreds of them because corporations have bought into this. Verizon has done an ad on, you know, don't treat girls like this. Hewlett-Packard has ads out there. Microsoft has ads out there, which we're going to close about. Use those. Don't feel like you necessarily have to create them from your own, and get them rolling on a TV in your comments area. Get them rolling on your website. It's an easy break-fix process. Female faculty hiring strategies. Search Caltech and see what they did. They actually went back to, you know, the old quota, which we started in the 70s and 80s, and I wasn't really fond of until I saw their success. They were given a hiring quota on how many females they had to hire in their STEM program. Ingenious. They now have one of the highest percentage of females in their STEM program than any other program in the nation. Female-friendly audit process. This is something I experimented with. I encourage you to tread softly, but I tell you the results were magnificent. I was brought into a local school in North Dakota, and I was asked to audit whether or not females would like to work here. I've got a set of questions just like a bank auditor does, and I gave them a score on good behavior and some recommendations on poor behavior. I did some rewards for good behavior and some consequences for poor behavior. The subtleties of having a female-friendly workplace are so strong in this very progressive institution that I hesitated to give them the results because they were terrible. So start a female-friendly audit process carefully, but don't shy away from doing it. You are going to hurt some feelings. You are going to have some tenderness around the topic. Know how to have the conversation and focus on the right, but bring in some of the wrong as well. That's change perceptions. Those are some things, the top 6 things that you can do. Once again, we're going to pause. We're right on schedule. We're going to pause, and I'm going to have you write down some possibilities. Where do you see possibilities in things that Ivy Tech can do, either on a big scale like Women's Connect or on a small scale like a Lunch and Learn where you watch Peggy McIntosh's White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack? Because until you change your perception, the advertisements you do to recruit students aren't going to change. Until you change your perceptions on that, your ability to work with the Ivy Tech recruiters to focus on females and to bring in a quota into your institution probably won't change. Are you ready for a quota? Can one of the administrators online write that down and figure out how you work it through your policies and your processes? Can you hire somebody to come in and do a female-friendly audit? Or is there somebody that a lot of people like in your institution and they can do the audit process to create a female-friendly environment that then you can brag about as you go out and recruit, you know, at your local high schools or your landing grounds that you do? So I'm going to pause, take a breath. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and then we'll come back and engage in our last 2 topics before I open it up for Q&A. Okay, the second to the last topic is create a female-friendly atmosphere, and then we'll talk about some of the things I did in my program to increase female enrollment. And if you look at what Carnegie Mellon did, in 2005 they had 7% women in their STEM programs. In 2014 they had 40% women in their STEM program. And one of the things they would attribute their success to is they modified admissions requirements. When I first read that, I was a little bit annoyed because I thought, oh, so did they dumb down the admission requirements for girls? How nice of you. They hadn't. What they had done is they just modified them to make it as competitive for both genders instead of just one gender. For example, we all know that research is going to tell us that, male genders are more spatial than female genders. Well, some of the spatial questions on the typical, standardized testing we use in this nation is very, very, very targeted towards male genders. And so they modified some of that. They didn't take away, they added in and accepted different standards. I don't have all the details on that. I'm trying to get somebody at Carnegie Mellon to share their secret sauce. And yes, I've called them because I'm known to pick up the phone and say, hi, I'm interested in knowing what the requirements are for boys and girls. And I did that, and I got a real high level, and they said apply, and then we'll look at it. And on the other hand, I have a good friend there that's helping me, dig through some information. It's not that they don't want to share, it's just that I don't think they know how to share it yet. Secondly, create a more nurturing environment. Harvey Mudd College did this. They created an environment that isn't only benefiting females and males, it's benefiting both. It's interesting that a female, if you look at the research, wants different things from an environment than a male does. And not to get into all of those details, but they changed up that, and they're bragging about it in their research, or in their recruiting efforts. It helped men and women. They did things like, created commons areas, brought in places where, young mothers could nurse, created more female bathrooms, because there's this famous auto body technology video online that talks about, there's a girl in auto body technology and she asked the professor where the female bathroom is, and he's like, I don't know, I think it's in a different building. And I'm not picking on auto body technology, that just happened to be the place where it happened. It happens in all disciplines. But they just created an environment that was gender friendly for both, and what they're finding is it's attracting males as well as females. Partner with large female friendly businesses. Microsoft hasn't always been, that's my background, I worked there if you didn't get that in the bio, but Microsoft hasn't always been the most female friendly environment. They typically carried 80% males, 20% females. When I sat on their corporate organizational development team, we had to do something about that. They've made some progress. Now it's 70-30. But they're relying on us in technology. They go, we want to recruit females. There's just not enough of them in the system. I believe that somewhat. I believe they also need to make changes on their end yet. But partner with a female-friendly business. Hewlett-Packard, Verizon, GE. Those are companies that have efforts in place that maybe you can tag on to. Tuskegee University did that. They partnered with Hewlett-Packard and Xerox, and they have this summer internship program for females that bring them in at a high school level, then into different university levels. Create development programs. This is a lot of work. I don't know where you're at in this process, but development programs are female-friendly advocacy programs, female-friendly women's studies programs, female-friendly only. And Worcester Polytech did that, and they increased to 34% of females in STEM. So create a female-friendly atmosphere, and it can start with that audit, because if you're going to recruit, you need to have a reputation that I belong there as a female. And there's these top 10 online or top 10 institutions that have done that. And that alone is giving them the reputation to recruit and for females to say, I belong. So quickly, before we go to Q&A, we have, I took this issue on in 2007, partly because it was mandated and partly because I wanted to. Because I felt bad. I was, one of two girls in a department of 10, and the other woman and I, had a good relationship, but not a great relationship. which is also sometimes the issue, as we know. I also felt like I wanted to increase my enrollment, and I saw this as some low-hanging fruit. So I went from 2% to maybe more than 10 in 2015. I don't have that. It started with an assessment. It started with challenging male-dominated paradigms, having those conversations about the boxes, but doing it in a different way. We cleaned up our office and the labs so they were more inviting, so we could have better pictures online. We established a relationship with the Campus Women's Center. That didn't go so well. They were less STEMmy than what we wanted. And so we have a relationship but haven't gotten a lot of legwork out of that. I have now in a male-dominated advisory board. When I brought it, there was one female on that advisory board, and that was me. I now have 10 females and 10 males on my advisory board. Sometimes 15 males, but it's almost a 10 to 15 ratio. I set a recruitment goal. I said I wanted to be at 20% females by 2010. I missed that target, but I sure came in higher than what I thought. I participated and built Women's Connect. And then I recently, 2 years ago, brought women's issues into every single one of my personal technology classes. I teach a lean manufacturing class, and part of that curriculum now is to talk about the gender inequity in manufacturing. I have, in this particular class, more males than females. I only have one female in this class because it was a time that I'm learning wasn't conducive. We're going to work through lots of videos. They're going to hear this presentation on women's inequity. They have to write a paper on what they're going to do to create a female-friendly environment when they are in the workplace. Here's an example of a video that they watch in class. It's a short video, but I'm going to show it to you, and then we're going to move on to the ending Q&A.
Are filling up their glasses. No expression, no expression. Mad world, mad world.
And so we have a conversation on that video in class, and if it's an online class, they have to do a discussion on it, because there's many little things like that as we shift the dial that we can do. Lastly, this is a list of some of the things that we've mostly talked about, but some of the things that I did to help my program. It took me 10 years, and I brought in 1 to 2 ideas a semester, depending upon how big they were. I think the only one that we haven't talked about in here are the last 3, which are personal mentorship of incoming females. I didn't have time to start a big program, and I didn't have time to roll out a lot of rules and regulations on it. So I just took all the females in the program and said, if you're a female in the program and you want to come to coffee with me, I'm available at 10 o'clock on Wednesdays. Because I was the only girl teacher in my program at the time, I had to do it simple. I had to invite a couple showed up, couple didn't, change the time. Now it's almost like we've become a coffee club in some respects. Established, worked with NAID. This year I sent 2 of my females from my program to the National Association of Electrical Distributors, Women in Electricity, I think it was, conference. They paid for it all. They're excited to have this. Companies have this same issue. It was brilliant. Next year I hope I can send a girl and a boy to that, because I think we both have to get at the table. Before we open it up for Q&A, I have a list of resources in this slide. Some I used for my content. As you'll know, I haven't footnoted each of my references and my stats. It's not that they don't exist, it's that it makes the slide really clunky. If you look at any of these resources, you will see some backup material for some of the things that we talked about. I'm going to give you a second to pause here, and then I'm going to make some closing comments and open it up for conversation. Lindsay told me today that we have until 10:30 for Q&A, if there is any. Okay. I hate to say in closing because lots of the good content happens during the Q&A, but in conjunction with recruiting for women in STEM, it's one choice at a time. And it really falls back to focusing on three key areas: helping our high school or helping our K through 12 system, which whether we think it's our responsibility or not, I think we have to take it on. 2, changing perceptions, and changing perceptions in a way where we can be heard, not dismissed. And 3, creating a female-friendly atmosphere, which everybody will benefit from. So our young parents and our parents who are more traditional in nature don't say things like, I don't want my girl holding a screwdriver. I don't, because it's not like that anymore. But yet there's generations of unfolding and creating female-friendly work environments. It's part perception and it's part reality. Changing that environment also means that we have to change the perception that if you're a female in STEM, you got to spend your life in the research lab and not have babies. We have to figure out how we can spend our time in the research lab and have babies and raise our children. And it can be done. It's being done across the globe. It's just not being done in masses in the United States. In conclusion, our next session will build on recruiting efforts and what we do once we get them here to keep us here. So I'm going to open it up for any types of questions and hand it back over to Lindsay to help facilitate that.
Okay, all right, thanks so much, Pam. What a wonderful presentation. I'm so excited about all of these strategies and everything that you've presented. Wanted to just remind the group too that we are recording this session, and you will be able to view the recording at any time after this. We'll probably have it on a website eventually, and I'll be in touch with all attendees to make sure you guys have a link. And also wanted to bring up that we did have a question about the statistics that you talked about, Pam, and maybe how we might be able to get access to the statistics that we didn't run through this time. If that was something you had handy, or if you would want to maybe address that, just how if we could reach out to you in a certain way to kind of get some statistics.
Yes, if somebody would like to tell me what statistics in particular they're looking for, I'd be glad to share the resources where I find them at. You know, as we all know about statistics, one publication will say women are make 77% on a dollar. Others will say 82. And so if they have some particular statistic in mind, I can either share what I have or maybe point to a resource that they might need.
Okay, wonderful. I'll make sure everyone has all of your contact information as well so they can continue the dialogue that you've started today. Okay, next question. Was Pathways to Success program, was that program for girls or for both genders? And that is from Val Golay, who is the Assistant Professor and Department Chair of Network Infrastructure.
That Pathways to Success was for both genders. And it was a program that, like I said, our local competitors started, and they go into grade schools and they start in 3rd grade. And each semester they offer a rotation on Monday and Wednesdays after school from like 3:15 to 5, and they bring in different topics. Like one topic was electricity, And then they had like a static electricity thing where my daughter's hair went all crazy, and they got to experiment with that. Another session is they brought in an architecture, and they got to do some preliminary CAD drawings in the lab, and it was just very topic related, but the whole goal was to be inspirational related. In addition to that Pathways to Success program, at the local PTA events that you go to where they do like the carnival and all of that, they also brought in a session where the kids could go, you know, when they do the cakewalk, if you guys do that in your area, or, you know, throw the ring toss on the bottle, they brought in a session on science where they had, you know, kids stand next to a wall and they ran electricity through the back of their body. So they're bringing it in little subtle ways where it was just really exciting. You might want to look on the ndsu.edu website, ndsu.edu website, and look for their, I believe it's called Pathways STEM Initiative. They've just recently went through a name change, but you should be able to find it on a search under STEM.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's see here. Would you share your female-friendly audit processes with us? Or form,
Yes.
sorry, the form.
Yes and no. I will if you have a conversation with me. And this is something that I want to do to prevent you some heartache that I went through. The first female-friendly audit I did was a disaster, because I took the questionnaire, I marched in there like a controller, I assessed the environment, I came up with the results, and I distributed them. That did more damage than it did help, because what I did is I picked on people. And it's not the questions that are important, it's knowing how to set up the framework for the audit, the questions that you should and shouldn't ask based on the particular chemistry of the culture, and it's knowing how to present the results. So I am willing to share anything as long as you're willing to have a conversation with me.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of really interesting questions here from Abigail, who is the Associate Director of Admissions in East Chicago. So this is a two-parter. I'll start with just the first part, and then we'll go to part two. It seems you use the term feminist in a negative way, but being a feminist is wanting equal rights and being treated the same, which is what you were talking about. Why are you afraid of using the term feminist?
That is an excellent question, Abigail, and I guess it's not that I'm afraid of using it, and I think that it comes with so much good work. I used to belong to NOW, the National Organization for Women, if any of you are familiar with that, and they have such great work that they do. Sometimes I have to be careful with the word feminist, though, because of some of the perceptions we need to change about that. And so one of the perceptions that I'm trying to change, that maybe you can help coach me on, is I want feminism to be perceived as exactly what you said it is. I don't want it to be perceived as what it was when it was originally launched back in the 60s and the 70s. So it's not that I'm afraid to use it, I just need some help knowing how to use it in a balanced way that's going to cause, see, even using it with you caused a negative reaction, and if I use it with somebody I shouldn't assume negative, maybe it wasn't, but it's one of those careful words that I would like to attach a more positive image to. So thank you for that question, Abigail.
Good. Okay. And so also just kind of furthering that conversation a little bit, when we talk about genders, she says also you say all genders, but then you say two genders. If you want to be inclusive to everyone, we shouldn't just say two genders, especially with this generation we're trying to recruit. It's a great point.
Yeah, it is a great point. I'm showing my age. Very, very open, but I appreciate that, and I will say all genders.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you,
Abigail.
Abigail.
You're a very thoughtful person.
Exactly. Wonderful. Okay, and then I'm going to unmute one of our attendees here, April Kripliver, and she's going to talk really briefly and just kind of open a dialogue about the Kripliver Women in STEM scholarship that has been created here at Ivy Tech. So give me one second while I unmute her.
Great.
Okay, April, you should be able to speak now.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Dr. April Miller Kripliver, and I am an associate professor in the School of Computing and Informatics at the Valparaiso campus. And I just wanted to make sure that all of us attending here, which I think it's fantastic that there are so many attending this today, it gives us hope. And that is to say that I set up a scholarship for women in STEM at Ivy Tech. And the cool thing about this scholarship is it's for life. It'll live on long after I'm dead. And it's to promote women in any technology major. So primarily probably the School of Computing and Informatics, yes. However, it's any woman who is touching technology at Ivy Tech Community College. And the great thing about this is that they do not need to apply. I don't want any students, female students especially, to drop through the cracks. So just because you didn't know about the Kripliver Scholarship should not keep you from winning the Kripliver Scholarship. So I've set it up such that the registrar just runs a report on gender and grade point average and major, and that spits out everybody who qualifies, and then those people will take whatever the scholarship is for that year. It gets bigger and bigger every year and splits that. So I'm very excited about it, and if you have any questions about it, please don't hesitate to email me. Perhaps Lindsay could put my email address up on the screen for everybody, akripliver@ivytech.edu, and I'll be happy to send you particulars. But just wanted to give a little push there, and be sure to say something in your classes to encourage women in STEM. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, April. I don't know if I am technically savvy enough to put your email address on the screen, but what I'll do is I'll send out a message to everybody so that they have all of your information with some other follow-up information from this event. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, and then lastly, we had a wonderful message from Sarah in Bloomington, and she just wanted to mention that they run an ethics class there in Bloomington, which is a robot club and a science club, and it's one evening every other week, and it's actually run by Ivy Tech students in ethics classes. So she just wanted to kind of put it out there. This is possible at Ivy Tech, and we have the groundwork laid for future opportunities as well. So thank you, Sarah, and I can include your information as well, and then if anybody wants to ask you further questions, then we'll open the floodgates. Okay, any other questions or anything else before we take it back to Pam and wrap it up? Okay, all right, Pam.
So, Lindsay, no more questions?
Nope, that's it.
All right. I'm going to leave you with then, Lindsay, can you give me, do I have control of the screen again?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I do? Okay. I'm going to leave you with one video, and you can tell that I have a lot of Microsoft in me because they're my alma mater. I'm going to leave you with one video, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks again online. So it'll just take me a couple of seconds to have that take over, and I'll get that up and running. Okay, it's loading. And it'll be on your screen in seconds.
If you think about it, science is like everything. It can really help you uncover like small little secrets. I built a garage door opener and I'm working on my own website. I built a computer and I opened a fridge with a Lego. When I was little, I used to think technology was great. And then I started thinking that it was more of a boys thing. I think that inventing is like for boys because they have Albert Einstein invented, he's a guy, and Benjamin Franklin also. There used to be a girl in the robotics class, but she quit, and so I'm the only girl left. Oh, you can't like science, you're a girl, you can't like any of these science things. In commercials, I saw a lot more men doing it. They might really love science, but they might be like afraid people might think, oh, don't boys do that? That's a boy thing. Wow, thank you. Dear Gabrielle, dear Anya, keep opening those garage doors. We think you'll create something great for us one day. I might someday, but not yet, because I'm pretty much not old enough, but soon. It's just really cool that I would write a letter. It's cool.
I just thought that was pretty cool. There's tons of those out there. Good luck, and we will see you in a couple of weeks to talk about once you get the women in your programs, how do you keep them there? Have an excellent weekend.
Thank you so much, Pam. Thanks, everybody. And get with me with any questions, and we'll have the follow-up email after this concludes. Thanks so much. Thanks, Pam.
Thanks.